Good morning, evening, afternoon, night, whatever time of day it is for you. Today we're going to talk about how to write a novel. How to write a novel. Have you ever thought about writing a novel? I remember the first time the idea was brought up to me. I was, 10, 11 years old. My friend said, "Let's write stories." And I said, "We can't write stories." She said, "Yeah, we can." I said, "Well, how do you know we can write stories? Only famous people can write stories, right? Famous people, that's who can write a story." We're talking, decades and decades ago, where, only if you were well known could you write a story. An unknown person could not write a story. And, of course, things have changed today, but my friend said, "No, really, we can write stories." Well, all right then. I'm thinking about this. I'm like, well, she might have a point. Maybe we can write our own stories. So that is how I got started writing fiction novels. And I do some books on writing actually as well. But when you're first getting started, you might wonder to yourself, how do you even start? Man, a book is so long. It might be 200 or 300 or 400 pages, or even one of mine I think is, I think the longest book I ever wrote as a single book is 788 pages. How do you even write something like that? How do you even begin? Well, let's figure it out. So how do you write a novel? First of all, I want to tell you that writing a novel can be one of the most exciting yet daunting projects for new fiction writers. But with the right guidance, a little bit of patience, and a big dash of creativity, you can turn your idea into a fully developed novel. And here's how you do it. Now, I'm going to add thoughts in here, and my thoughts are going to be purple. If I can get them to work. Let's see. I might change my color here, green. Yeah, there we go. All right, so the green works. So I'll be adding stuff into this, and my text will be green. So the first thing you need to do is have an idea. And chances are, if you're watching this video and looking up articles, you've already got an idea for a book. You already know what you want to write about, but you're not sure how to begin. So let's take a look at that. So you want to start with your idea. And it doesn't need to be a fully formed idea. Some writers find inspiration in a character, a setting, a what-if scenario, or an emotion, usually a strong one, usually love, hate, greed. I do a lot with the 7 Deadly Sins. I like those because humans are prone to those kind of things, and I really like that. So here's what you need to do to refine that initial idea. And I'll just share with you what my idea was for the horror of the Tazumari greed statue. My initial idea was something along the lines of, this is going to drive me nuts. It's not keeping my green selected. I want to write a book that highlights the evils of being greedy. It's a thing with me right now. I'm so sick and tired of greedy everybody. Greedy people, greedy corporations, greedy utilities, greed, I can't stand it. and it's a seven deadly sin. So this is the idea behind the horror of the Tazumari statue. Because once I had that idea set in my mind, I started asking myself questions. Why do I like this idea? I like this idea because I hate greed. And I'm sick of all these companies taking my last dime. So I want to write a book about it. And keep in mind, that is available on Kindle Vella, but Kindle Vella is shutting down in February of 2025, so about 4 months from now. I'm now working on turning that Kindle Vella into an ebook, and it'll be part of my Naughty Reads collection. It'll probably be an erotic horror, but that's what I'm going to do with that one. But here's how I got started. I decided that greed was making me personally very, very angry. And I wanted to write a book about it that highlighted the ills of greed. The sin of greed. There we go. The sin of greed. So ask yourself and answer some questions. What excites you about the idea? Who's the story about? Why is this story worth telling? Or a better question is, why do you think that your idea is worth telling? To keep the ideas flowing, you need to keep a notebook or a note thing on your phone where you write down anything that inspires you. Snippets of dialogue, potential plots. You can even write down your dreams in this notebook or notepad on your phone or whatever. That can help you create new ideas, and it can also help you add to your story. Many writers actually write in their sleep. Then they get up and they write that down, if you can remember it. Lucid dreaming helps a lot. If you want to help yourself in your writing career, learn how to dream lucidly. It's also sometimes called directed dreaming, and it helps with insomnia too. So, alright, so let's talk about expanding the idea. Next, always, expand on your idea to flesh out the concept. Try free writing something. Let's just open a notebook, grab a pen or a pencil, and just write something down about the idea. And I say do this on an actual piece of paper, because you may not keep anything in your free write, but it helps get you focused and get your mind straight for working on your idea. Number 2, develop a plot outline. Now, when I say develop a plot outline, it does not have to be a detailed outline like the thing you make in school or college or whatever. It does not have to be that detailed. And it shouldn't be, because if you make one that's really, really detailed, by the time you get to, what is it, 1, A. By the time you get to A, you're already outside of your outline. Okay, so don't do it. And this thing is not doing my green right. So, and you've got several different ways to outline. You can outline according to the 3-act structure. This is the beginning, the climax, and the ending. Or, like this says, setup, confrontation, and resolution. If you use this is the traditional structure. It'll help you keep your story paced, and it helps keep readers engaged. So if you're going to write like a 200-page book, or 300, let's do 300, that's easier to divide. Let's say you're going to do a 300-page book. The first 100 pages is the setup. The second 100 pages is the climax, and the last 100 pages is the ending or conclusion, and possibly the setup for the next book if you're doing a series. And when many students of literature and film and all that study three-act structures, what I've heard is they tend to go watch the Jaws movies, because those movies specifically seem to be done in the three-act structure. I have never watched a Jaws movie, so I am telling you what I have heard. I will never watch a Jaws movie. I'm not a fan of slasher horror, so there you go. Now, the next way that you can outline your book is by starting with a sentence and blowing it up to a paragraph. This is actually my favorite method, because what you end up with, what you want to do, you want to write a sentence. A greed statue with a greed demon in it terrorizes a community. There you go. There's my sentence for the horror of the Tazumari greed statue. And here's my paragraph. Boy, this green is just not sticking the way I want it to. All right, so gimme, gimme, greedy, greedy. Gimme, gimme, greedy, greedy. That's the call of the Tazumari greed statue. Of course, it wasn't always a greed statue. In its heyday, it was a statue of benevolence and goodwill. That helped remind the Tazumari to always conduct fair trade. So how'd that statue turn bad? We're not terribly sure, but we know this. A greedy CEO named Nelson Goldenflower opened that demon's debug box, and now we're all scrambling. But let me tell you the story of how it all started. So there's my paragraph. Here's my sentence, and then the paragraph is told from one of the demons, the Satan's hell demons that came up to deal with this statue. Anyway, so that's my sentenced paragraph thing. And when I do an outline, and we're going to do air quotes with that, this is all I ever do, is an outline of a list of character names. So the big thing here is you want to remember to keep your outline very, 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 very flexible. If you make a rigid outline, you will not be using it for very long, and then pretty soon you'll be flying by the seat of your pants. And if you are not comfortable with seat of your pants writing, you will not like it once you crack through your outline and it totally falls apart. So make sure your outline is very, very, very flexible. Once you have your outline done, remember to create believable characters. There are two ways to write a novel. You can write a novel that is God almighty, it's doing it again. That is plot driven, or it can be character driven. If you outline the way I do, which is literally with the sentence and the paragraph, there's a good chance that it's going to be character driven. If you do more than that, there's a good chance your story is going to be plot driven. But you need to figure out who your characters are. And some writers like to write full-fledged character profiles. That have the character names, their background, their desires, their flaws, their relationships. And that's fine. But make sure you set a time limit on that. Because if you write 100,000 words of character profiles, you still haven't written one word of your novel. So watch what you're doing. So here's what I do. I write down the name. Like we're going to go Martha Lilitu. That is one of the lead characters in the Horror of the Tazumari Greed statue. She is a lust demon. She is working with Joe Lou, who is another lust demon. Her goal is to get the greed statue for Mammon. There you go. There's my character profile. And Joe is the same way. Joe Alou. He's a lust demon that has been recruited by Mammon to do some greed work, aka get the greed statue. There you go. That's all I ever do for character descriptions, backgrounds, etc., etc. All of that, the rest of their backgrounds and things like that, I'll put it in the story somewhere. You know, it'll come out as the story rolls along, but I'm not going to write 1,000 words each of their character histories. Hell, it may change. So I don't do it. Plus, I want to get to the story as soon as possible. All right, next up, give your protagonist a goal. Your protagonist is your main character. In this case, I've got two of them, Joe and Martha. They are both the protagonists. The antagonist is, in this particular story, it's everybody else, but specifically it's that Tazumari greed statue. And keep in mind, everybody here is evil. So your protagonist doesn't have to be good. Your antagonist doesn't have to be evil. Everybody can be evil. Everybody can be good. You know, it's the goals that matter when you're doing your story. Martha and Joe's goals are different than that Tazumari greed statue's goals. It's different than Mamon's goals, different than Lucifer's goals. You know, to me, those are just, your protagonist wants this, your antagonist wants this. It's about goals. Remember to create conflict. This can be internal conflict or external conflict or a combination of both. But you need to have conflict. So in my story, and we're doing this before we do the goal thing, but the goal in mine is pretty obvious. The goal is to get the Tazumari greed statue. That's the goal. Okay, and your goal doesn't have to be complicated. The goal does not have to be complicated. It can be very simple. The goal, get the Tazumari greed statue. And you want to create conflict around this Tazumari greed statue or whatever you're doing. And this is put obstacles in your character ways. I've actually already put an obstacle in the way that the story is built. Okay? So we're talking about Martha and Joe want to get the Tazumari greed statue. Martha and Joe are lust demons. They're not greed demons. So there's conflict already. Those guys want to do lusty demon things. And the greed demons are all busy and they can't handle this greed demon project. So their conflict is that they want to do lusty demon things and they're on a greed demon mission. Instant conflict. So just do yourself a favor and build the conflict into the structure of the story. You'll make your life a whole lot easier. Number 4, build your world. What world are you writing in? And this isn't just for fantasy novels. This is your world. What is in your world? My worlds tend to be a little bit dirty, a little bit weird. They're based on the real world, but they're different. What does your world look like? Think about the details, whether it's a magical kingdom or a small town. Consider the culture, the climate, the geography, and the history. Consider the rules of the world. Now, this is important. The rules of your world will set the rules for the book. And once you set these rules, you need to stick to them. There's a saying that says there are no rules in fiction. Well, there are rules in fiction, and the author creates those rules. Okay, so once you make these rules, make sure your book adheres to them. Once you set a punctuation standard, make sure that that punctuation is all the way, always through the book. Weave your setting into the story. Don't author vomit your shit, okay? Author vomit is where you put in a whole bunch of crap without actually advancing the story. I like to call it author vomit. In movies, this is where you get a whole bunch of those fancy camera shots that do exactly nothing. Unless it's a quick pan over the city that takes less than a second, everything else is author vomit, it's director vomit. Don't do it. This is where you dump a whole lot of details or a whole lot of flowery garbage into your book without actually doing anything. Sprinkle that stuff all the way through the book. I tend to drop descriptions in a piece at a time. So by the end of the story, you know what the house looks like. You know what the characters look like. But you don't know that from the outset because I didn't write some awful piece of crap where Martha's long flowing hair flowed down her shoulders, gently caressed by the air conditioning vent. Save it. Nobody wants to read that shit anymore. So unless you're doing something supernatural or creepy with that wind coming out of the air conditioning vent that's caressing her hair, leave it alone. It's like I practice a minimalist way of doing things. Martha walks into the building, she unlocks her office door and walks in. Sets her briefcase on the floor, and by about the time she's ready to take a cup of coffee, there's a knock on the door. There you go. That's what we're doing. So we don't need to know what Martha looks like right away. You will know it by the end of the book. You'll know what Joe looks like at the end of the book in all his forms. But don't slow down the story to drop an essay on what these guys look like. You're going to lose your momentum. So there's my rant on that. Number 5, start writing and keep writing. This is where a lot of authors get hit with the whole blank page thing. It can be really, really difficult. So here's what I tell people to do. Write chapter 1. Okay, you can do a setting description for this initially. In the living room. If you set it in the bedroom and they're waking up, you better have a supernatural something or other to make it, interesting. That's one of the cliches that nobody likes anymore is waking your character up. Now, if that's the only way you can start the story is by waking your character up, that's cool. When you get done with it, delete those, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 paragraphs and start in the kitchen. Unless your character quite literally got out of bed and went and got a cup of coffee. Then, you need to start after the cup of coffee. Okay? Don't put that in there. Nobody wants to read that either, according to the powers that be. And there are exceptions to that rule. I have books where characters are getting up, but it is literally part of the thing. Like it's part of what's wrong in the story. So anyway, we have your chapter 1 setting description. We're in the living room, right? There you are, Or write your character's name. Martha walked through her front door and into the living room. It was dusty. She hadn't been there typos. She hadn't been there in a month. There you go. There's how you start a story. And then just keep going. Just keep going. One word will follow another word, will follow another word, will follow another word. What I like to keep asking myself, because I write by the seat of my pants, is what happens next? What happens next? It's my favorite question to ask. Or sometimes I'll be like, what else can I throw at these characters? It's always a good one. What else can I throw at them? My Avia books are really good at this because, not only was I asking myself what happens next, I was asking myself, what else can I throw at them? And by the end of 5 books, I had thrown everything at them, including the kitchen sink, a couple of times. Probably that's probably my most mainstream book right there. I don't tend to write real mainstream stuff, but the Avia series was pretty mainstream. To help you in your task, you can set daily or weekly goals. I don't do that, as I've said in other videos. I just don't set these types of goals. My goal is to finish the book within X amount of days, usually less than 30. But what I do like is write the book. Write the book. As a beginning author, you do not want to worry about editing until you get your first draft done. The editing process starts on your second draft, not your first draft. I also want you to keep in mind that your first draft will suck. Okay? Your first draft of your first book will absolutely 100% suck. It'll be so bad that you could probably throw it away and start over with the same concept and the same characters and write it better. But you need to be able to accept that. Your first draft of your first book will suck. Okay, and at no point should you ever try to publish that. And here's the thing. This is why I say new authors need to do my 5 draft method. Because you need to limit how many drafts you're doing. If your book still sucks after 5 drafts, start over. Start over. With the same concept, the same characters, write it again. On a clean piece of paper or a clean Word document, whatever it is, write it again. Number 6, speaking of revising and editing. Once you've completed your first draft, this starts the revision process. Okay? Now, depending on how long it took you to write your first draft, you can literally scroll to the top and start editing right away. This says give yourself a few days or a few weeks to gain a fresh perspective. Now, if you wrote this in 3 weeks, if you wrote your first draft in 3 weeks, give yourself some time off to forget what you wrote. If it took you a month to write it, or several months to write it, you already don't remember what's in the front of that book. So go ahead and scroll to the top and start editing, because you don't remember what's there anyway. And what you're looking for in your second draft, your first draft after you get the thing finished, is big picture stuff. You're looking for plot holes, missing text, things where you need more description, unresolved conflicts. Let's say your character says, oh yeah, I'm going to call you back later, and you realize that your character never called that other character back later. Those are the kind of things that you're looking for in your second draft. As you go through, you'll fine-tune the language and fine-tune the verbiage and the descriptions and things like that. But you want to go from big to small. At your second draft, do the big things. Your third draft, do the smaller things. Your fourth draft, do the smaller things. Your fifth draft, you should really just be fixing punctuation and spelling errors that you missed on your other 4 drafts. Once you get through your third draft of my 5-draft method, you need to get some feedback, especially as a beginning author. You need to find people that will read your book and tell you whether it sucks or not. That can be a critique book or beta readers or family or friends, but be careful when you get the help of your family and friends, because they may not read your book at all. And a lot of them are going to want to not hurt your feelings. So they're going to be like, oh, it's fantastic. I loved every word. Like every word of the 5 they read. Okay. So you need to find people who are going to read it and give you actual honest feedback. You also need to be open to being critiqued. So you need to take everyone's thoughts into consideration, but it's still your book. And the thing I would tell you to look for is look for the same things. Okay, so if somebody says you need more description, and another person says you need more description, and a third person says you need more description, then you probably need more description. If one person says you need more description and one person says you need more character development and one person says I don't understand your plot, none of that matters because none of them said the same thing. You can take a look at all that stuff and make sure it's how you want it, how you think the story should flow and read and behave. But what you're looking for really is stuff that everybody said is wrong with the book. We don't like your characters. If like 4 people said we don't like your characters, there's something wrong with your characters. Get some clarification. If 4 of your beta readers said I don't like your plot, you better figure out what they don't like about that plot, because that's a big problem. So you're looking for similarities in your feedback. If more than one person says the same thing, you need to take a hard look at it. If everybody's all over the place, think about it, look at your book, and make sure it's what you want it to say. And then go with that. Now we've got number 8. Polish your final draft. Once you're done with all your revisions and your feedback revisions and all of that, it's time to polish your final draft. And the term polish is so ambiguous. I always think of like polishing a car. How do you polish a novel like a car? There's no such thing as, book wax, unless you're polishing the cover literally in a library. So, but anyway, what it means is that you need to read your book one more time and check it for typos, grammar errors, and consistency, especially on your verb tenses. And if you're going to spell something wrong, make sure it is spelled wrong all the way through the book. Like, for my vampire books, I like to use the word expel. And I especially like to use the word expellation. That's not a word. That's not a word. That's not a conjugation of expel. And I have spelled it with 2 L's. Make sure that you spell your words wrong consistently. Especially if you're creating words. Make sure you spell them wrong consistently. It's part of the rules of your book. Now, if you have money to burn, you can consider professional editing. But you need to think about every dime you spend on your book is a dime that you have to recoup. So I caution new writers in putting themselves in the financial hole right away. There are reasons to get a professional editor, but if you're preparing your manuscript for submission, your agent is going to also hire editors. If you're self-publishing, then, you've got a whole different thing there. You need to be ready to go. And if you don't know how to publish your book, which I have a book for that, it's called Self-Publishing for Indie Authors, I think. But I've got one. It's in my list of books. And, if you think you need help, then you can hire help. But don't go into debt for this. If you've got money to burn, then pay for editors, pay for formatting, pay for a book cover. If you don't, learn how to do it yourself. You'll be better off in the long run if you can do it yourself. And 9, consider your publishing options. There are lots of options to publish. You can traditional publish, which is finding an agent or a publisher. You can self-publish your books, which means you publish your books yourself. You either hire people or create your own covers and this, that, and the other thing. And you can choose hybrid publishing, which can be a slippery slope, because hybrid publishing can be a vanity press. This is where you pay the publisher to publish your book. You don't ever want to go with a vanity press. If they're asking you to pay for the cost of your publication, and especially to buy 5,000 of your own paperbacks, don't do it. Do not do it. That's called vanity press. And they say everybody is a bestseller because every author that they've got, they paid them $10,000 and got 5,000 of their own books. Yeah, of course they're a bestseller. They bought 5,000 of their own books. And now they're in a back bedroom collecting dust. Or better, the books start becoming the furniture. Instead of having a coffee table book, the coffee table is books. That guest bed in the back room? Yeah, the bed frame is the books. The table next to the front door? Yep, more books. So don't use vanity press, or you're going to have to get real creative with what you're going to do with 5,000 books. Number 10. After completing the novel, many writers experience a sense of accomplishment mixed with a bit of doubt. What do you do next? After you finish your book, after you publish it, the best thing to do is to start on your next book. That's what I do. I don't throw parties or anything after I finish a book. I just start on the next book. So anyway, that is how you write a novel. There's all the steps from beginning to publishing to what to do after you publish your book. If you are so motivated, please like and subscribe. If you're not, then I thank you for watching, and I will talk to you later. Have a great night or day.